All right, we are coming up on 8 o'clock. So, let's go ahead and get settled, get comfortable, and get ready for a brand new book as we start to explore one of the titans of American lit, Mark Twain, with probably his first major publication, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Took me a little bit longer than I expected to press the button there to switch us back over to the main screen, but it is what it is. So, we had a lot of fun with Three Musketeers, but it did last us a good while. And it got me thinking, we can do something a little bit shorter, a little bit easier reading, but nonetheless, still a lot of fun. And we have been remiss. We've gone for half a year, 6 months already we've been streaming, and we haven't read any Mark Twain yet. It's a travesty, I know. So, let's fix that tonight, shall we? Now, I will preface this as it would be problematic not to. This book and its follow-up, Huck Finn, are a little contentious in mostly that it presents a very accurate portrayal of life in the Deep South in the late 18, or I guess it's written such and set in the early 1800s. So it is a little raw, and some of the tensions run a little bit high. I generally try not to censor what we read, but I do have a hard line in the sand. You may know that there are particular slurs that I do not say on air, and that is partly because they're not necessary in this day and age, and partly because I value my channel. I know, it's silly, but that's about all that I will cut off. I'll either replace the word or let it be known what was intended. But that's about it. So, we may come across some of those in the readings, maybe not tonight, but definitely in the course of this book, and if we get into the next one, it definitely becomes more pertinent. So just be aware. This book is a product of the time, and is an accurate representation of the time. Not making any apologies for it, not making any deferrals or demurrals. This is what life was, and it's a good way to put it. Yeah, that's the thing. It's delicate. Twain is a master of the art, and is a lot of fun to read. But in the modern age, and this isn't about being oversensitive or anything, it's just that times have changed. And so, it's important to be respectful about that. This is a lot like how we approach Lovecraft. And, well, honestly, Lovecraft we approach delicately because he's a very interesting sort with a lot of bad ideas. Twain doesn't have any sort of those problems. It's just a matter of that's how things were. So, and as far as his thought goes, he is a lot more progressive than his contemporaries. So, I have no problems with Twain as a person, as his thoughts or anything. It's just the fact that some of the word choices are very strong. So, that's just forewarned is forearmed. And that's enough banter about that for me tonight. Just know, that's my, one line in the sand. I won't say that specific slur that you know that I'm talking about. But if I stumble and hesitate and hem and haw a little bit about it, you know that's what was meant. Alright. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the book, shall we? It might take me a little bit to settle into voices and characterizations for some of these characters. You may know, I've got a decent southern twang if I let it come out. Exactly. understanding something at the time doesn't mean that sensibilities haven't changed. We can't ignore them. It's good to be aware of them, but it's also good to know that we shouldn't perpetuate that. Glad we're on the same page. Anyway, yeah, so it may take me a little bit to find the proper characterizations for the characters, find the voices, just by virtue of, it's been so long since I've read this, I don't remember who all is about, how twangy they should be, and how much I can put up with myself being a little twangy. Because if you remember, when I was reading that, a few characters, even in some Lovecraft stories, that had a particularly thick accent, sometimes it's hard to slip back out of it. So, we'll see. Alright, so let's just get started, and we'll just have some fun with it. So, let us begin with The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. Chapter 1. Tom! No answer. Tom! No answer. What's going with that boy? I wonder. You, Tom! No answer. The old lady pulled her spectacles down and looked over them about the room. Then she put them up and looked out under them. She seldom or never looked through them for so small a thing as a boy. They were her state pair, the pride of her heart, and were built for style, not service. She could have seen through a pair of stove lids just as well. She looked perplexed for a moment, and then said, not fiercely, but still loud enough for the furniture to hear, "Well, I lay, if I get hold of you, I'll—" She did not finish, for by this time she was bending down and punching under the bed with the broom, and so she needed a breath to punctuate the punches with. She resurrected nothing but the cat. I never did see the beat of that boy. She went to the open door and stood in it and looked out among the tomato vines and jimpson weeds that constituted the garden. No Tom. So she lifted up her voice at an angle calculated for distance, and shouted, "You! Tom!" There was a slight noise behind her, and she turned just in time to seize a small boy by the slack of his roundabout and arrest his flight. "There! I might have thought of that closet. What you been doing in there?" "Nothing." "Nothing? Look at your hands. Look at your mouth. What is that truck?" "I don't know, Aunt." "Well, I know. It's jammed. That's what it is. 40 times I said, if you didn't let that jam alone, I'd skin you. Hand me that switch." The switch hovered in the air. The peril was desperate. "Ma, look behind you, Aunt." The old lady whirled round and snatched her skirts out of danger. The lad fled on the instant, scrambled up the high board fence, and disappeared over it. His Aunt Polly stood surprised a moment, and then broke into a gentle laugh. "And the boy I never learned anything. Ain't he learned me, played me enough tricks like that for me to be looking out for him by this time? Oh, fools is the biggest fools there is. Can't learn no dog new tricks, as the saying is. But my goodness, he never plays them in like 2 days, and how is a body to know what's coming? He appears to know just how long he can torment me before I can get my dandruff, and he knows if he can make out to put me off for a minute or make me laugh. It's all down again. I can't hit him a lick. I ain't doing my duty by that boy, and that's the Lord's truth. Goodness knows. Spare the rod, spoil the child, as the good book says. I'm a laying up sin and suffering for us both, I know. He's full of the old scratch, but laws of me. He's my own dead sister's boy, poor thing. I ain't got the heart to lash him, somehow. Every time I let him off, my conscience does hurt me so. And every time I hit him, my old heart almost breaks. Well, man that is born a woman is a few days and full of trouble, as the scripture says. And I reckon it's so. He'll play hooky this evening, and I'll be just obliged to make him work tomorrow to punish him. Yes, mighty hard to make him work Saturdays, when all the boys is having holiday, but he makes more work than he hates anything else. And I've got to do some of my duty by him, or I'll be the ruination of the job. Tom did play hooky, and he had a very good time. He got back home barely in season to help Jim, the small colored boy, saw next day's wood and split the kindlings before supper. At least, he was there in time to tell his adventures to Jim, while Jim did 3/4 of the work. Tom's younger brother, or rather half-brother, Sid, was already through with his part of the work, picking up chips, for he was a quiet boy, and had no adventurous, troublesome ways. While Tom was eating his supper, and stealing sugar as opportunity offered, Aunt Polly asked him questions that were full of guile and very deep, for she wanted to trap him into damaging revealments. Like many other simple-hearted souls, it was her pet vanity to believe she was endowed with a talent for dark and mysterious diplomacy, and she loved to contemplate her most transparent devices as marvels of low cunning. Said she, "Tom, it was middling warm in school, wasn't it?" "Yes'm." "Powerful warm, wasn't it?" "Yes'm." "Didn't you want to go in a swimming, Tom?" Bit of a scare shot through Tom, a touch of uncomfortable suspicion. He searched Aunt Polly's face, but it told him nothing, so he said, "No, well, not very much." The old lady reached out her hand and felt Tom's shirt and said, "But you ain't too warm now, though." And it flattered her to reflect that she had discovered that the shirt was dry, without anybody knowing that that was what she had in her mind. But in spite of her, Tom knew where the wind lay now, so he forestalled what might be the next move. "Some of us pumped on our heads. Mine's damp yet, see?" Aunt Polly was vexed to think she had overlooked a bit of circumstantial evidence and missed a trick. Then she had a new inspiration. "Tom, you didn't have to undo your shirt collar where I sewed it to pump on your head, did you? Unbutton your jacket." The trouble vanished out of Tom's face. He opened his jacket. His shirt collar was securely sewed. "Bother! Well, go along with you. I'd make sure you played hooky and been a swimming, but I forgive you, Tom. I reckon you're kind of a singed cat, as the saying is. Better than you look. This time." She was half sorry her sagacity had miscarried, and half glad that Tom had stumbled into obedient conduct for once. But Sidney said, "Well now, if I didn't think you sewed his collar with white thread, but it's black." "Why, I did sew it with white, Tom!" But Tom did not wait for the rest. As he went out the door, he said, "Sidney, I'll lick you for that." In a safe place, Tom examined 2 large needles, which were thrust into the lapels of his jacket, and had thread bound about them. One needle carried white thread, and the other black. He said, "She'd never noticed if it hadn't been for Sid. Confound it! Sometimes she sews it with white, and sometimes she sews it with black. Wish to gee minnie she'd stick to one or the other. I can't keep the run of them, but I bet you I'll lay him Sid for them. I'll learn him." He was not the model boy of the village. He knew the model boy very well, and loathed him. Within 2 minutes, or even less, he had forgotten all his troubles. Not because his troubles were one whit less heavy and bitter to him than a man's are to a man, but because a new and powerful interest bore them down and drove them out of his mind for the time, just as men's misfortunes are forgotten in the excitement of new enterprises. This new interest was a valued novelty in whistling, which he had just acquired from a Negro, and he was suffering to practice it undisturbed. It consisted in a peculiar bird-like turn, a sort of liquid warble, produced by touching the tongue to the roof of the mouth at short intervals in the midst of the music. The reader probably remembers how to do it, if he has ever been a boy. Diligence and attention soon gave him the knack of it, and he strode down the street with his mouth full of harmony and his soul full of gratitude. He felt much as an astronomer feels who has discovered a new planet. No doubt, as far as strong, deep, unalloyed pleasure is concerned, the advantage was with the boy, not the astronomer. The summer evenings were long. It was not dark yet. Presently, Tom checked his whistle. A stranger was before him. A boy a shade larger than himself. A newcomer of any age or either sex was an impressive curiosity in the poor little shabby village of St. Petersburg. This boy was well-dressed, too. Well-dressed on a weekday. This was simply astounding. His cap was a dainty thing. His close-buttoned blue cloth roundabout was new and natty, and so were his pantaloons. He had shoes on, and it was only Friday. He even wore a necktie, a bright bit of ribbon. He had a citified air about him that ate into Tom's vitals. The more Tom stared at the splendid marvel, the higher he turned up his nose at his finery, and the shabbier and shabbier his own outfit seemed to him to grow. Neither boy spoke. If one moved, the other moved, but only sidewise. In a circle. They kept face to face and eye to eye all the time. Finally, Tom said, "I can lick you." "I'd like to see you try it." "Well, I can do it." "No, you can't either." "Yes, I can." "No, you can't." "I can't." "You can't." An uncomfortable pause. Then Tom said, "What's your name?" "'Tisn't any of your business, maybe." "Well, I allow I'll make it my business." "Well, why don't you? If you say much, I will. Much. There now. Oh, you think you mighty smart, don't you? I could lick you with one hand tied behind me if I wanted to." "Well, why don't you do it? You say you can do it." "Well, I will, if you fool with me." "Oh, yes, I've seen whole families in the same fix. Smarty. You think you're the sum? Now, don't you? Oh, what a hat! You can lump that hat if you don't like it. How dare you to knock it off? And anybody that'll take a dare will suck eggs." "You're a liar. You're another. You're a fighting liar and doesn't take it up." "Take a whack. Say, you give me much more of your sass. I'll take and bounce a rock off in your head." "Oh, of course you will." "Well, I will." "Well, why don't you do it then? What do you keep saying you will for? Why don't you do it?" "It's because you're afraid." "I ain't afraid." "You are." "I ain't." "You are." Another pause, and more eyeing and sidling around each other. Presently they were shoulder to shoulder. Tom said, "Get away from here." "Get away yourself." I won't either." So they stood, each with a foot placed at an angle as a brace, and both shoving with might and main and glowering at each other with hate. But neither could get an advantage. After struggling till both were hot and flushed, each relaxed the strain with watchful caution, and Tom said, "You're a coward and a pup. I'll tell my big brother on you, and he can thrash you with his little finger, and I'll make him do it too." "What do I care for your big brother? I got a brother that's bigger than he is, and what's more, he can throw him over that fence too." Both brothers were imaginary. "That's a lie." "You're saying so. Don't make it so." Tom drew a line in the dust with his big toe and said, "I dare you to step over that, and I'll lick you till you can't stand up. Anybody that'll take a dare will steal sheep." The new boy stepped over promptly and said, "Now you said you'd do it. Now let's see you do it." "Don't you crowd me now. You better look out." "Well, you said you'd do it. Why don't you do it?" "By jingo, for 2 cents, I will do it." The new boy took 2 broad coppers out of his pocket and held them out with derision. Tom struck them to the ground. In an instant, both boys were rolling and tumbling in the dirt, gripped together like cats. And for the space of a minute, they tugged and tore each other's hair and clothes, punched and scratched each other's nose, and covered themselves with dust and glory. Presently, the confusion took form, and through the fog of battle, Tom appeared, seated astride the new boy, and pounding him with his fist. "Ha! Enough!" said he. The boy only struggled to free himself. He was crying, mainly from rage. "Ha! Enough!" And the pounding went on. At last the stranger got out a smothered "Enough!" and Tom let him up and said, "Now that'll learn you. Better look out who you're fooling with next time." The new boy went off, brushing the dust from his clothes, sobbing, snuffling it occasionally, looking back and shaking his head and threatening what he would do to Tom the next time he caught him out. To which Tom responded with jeers and started off in high feather. And as soon as his back was turned, the new boy snatched up a stone, threw it, and hit him between the shoulders, and then turned tail and ran like an antelope. Tom chased the traitor home, and thus found out where he lived. He then held a position at the gate for some time, daring the enemy to come outside. But the enemy only made faces at him through the window, and declined. At last, the enemy's mother appeared, and called Tom a bad, vicious, vulgar child, and ordered him away. And so he went away. But he said he "'lowed to lay for that boy." He got home pretty late that night, and when he climbed cautiously into the window, he uncovered an ambuscade in the person of his aunt. When she saw the state his clothes were in, her resolution to turn his Saturday holiday into captivity at hard labor became adamantine in its firmness. That brings us to the end of Chapter 1, where we've seen a few of the characters introduced already. We've got the stern old Aunt Polly, we've got Sid the Snitch, and we've got Tom, always out for a little bit of trouble. Yeah, it's a fun little interaction right from the start. All right. Chapter 2. Saturday morning was come, and all the summer world was bright and fresh and brimming with life. There was a song in every heart, and if the heart was young, the music issued at the lips. There was cheer in every face, and a spring in every step. The locust trees were in bloom, and the fragrance of the blossoms filled the air. Cardiff Hill, beyond the village and above it, was green with vegetation. It lay just far enough away to seem a delectable land, dreamy, reposeful, and inviting. Tom appeared on the sidewalk with a bucket of whitewash and a long-handled brush. He surveyed the fence, and all gladness left him, and a deep melancholy settled down upon his spirit. 30 yards of board fence, 9 feet high. Life to him seemed hollow, an existence but a burden. Sighing, he dipped his brush and passed it along the topmost plank, repeated the operation, did it again, compared the insignificant whitewashed streak with the far-reaching continent of unwhitewashed fence, and sat down on a tree box, discouraged. Jim came skipping out at the gate with a tin pail and singing Buffalo Gals. Bringing water from the town pump had always been hateful work in Tom's eyes. Before. But now it did not strike him so. He remembered that there was company at the pump. White, mulatto, and Negro boys and girls were always there waiting their turns, resting, trading playthings, quarreling, fighting, skylarking. And he remembered that although the pump was only 150 yards off, Jim never got back with a bucket of water under an hour. And even then, somebody generally had to go after him. Tom said, "Say, Jim, I'll fetch water if you'll whitewash some." Jim shook his head and said, "Can't. Ma's Tom, old missus, she told me I got to go and get this water and not stop fooling around with anybody. She says she expect Ma's Tom going to ask me to whitewash. And so she told me to go along and tend to my own business. She allowed she'd tend to do the whitewashing." "Oh, never you mind what she said, Jim. That's the way she always talks. Give me the bucket. I won't be gone only a minute. She won't ever know." "Oh, I dassent. Ma's Tom, old missus, she'd take and tie the head off of me. Indeed she would. She never licks anybody. Whacks them over the head with her thimble. Who cares for that? You know, she talks awful, but talk don't hurt. Anyways, it don't if she don't cry. Jim, I'll give you a marvel. I'll give you a white alley. Jim began to waver. White alley, Jim? And it's bully tall? My, that's a mighty gay marvel, I tell you. But Miles Tom, he's powerful. Afraid old missus. And besides, if you will, I'll show you my sore toe. Jim was only human. This attraction was too much for him. He put down his pail, took the white alley, and bent over the toe with absorbing interest, while the bandage was being unwound. In another moment, he was flying down the street with his pail and a tingling rear. Tom was whitewashing with vigor, and Aunt Polly was retiring from the field with a slipper in her hand and triumph in her eye. But Tom's energy did not last. He began to think of the fun he had planned for this day, and his sorrows multiplied. Soon, the free boys would come tripping along on all sorts of delicious expeditions. They would make a world of fun of him for having to work. The very thought of it burnt him like fire. He got out of his worldly wealth and examined it. Bits of toys, marbles, and trash, enough to buy in exchange of work, maybe. But not half enough to buy so much as half an hour of pure freedom. So he returned his straitened means to his pocket, and gave up the idea of trying to buy the boys. At this dark and hopeless moment, an inspiration burst upon him. Nothing less than a great, magnificent inspiration. He took up his brush and went tranquilly to work. Ben Rogers hove in sight presently. The very boy, of all boys, whose ridicule he had been dreading. Ben's gait was the hop, skip, and jump, proof enough that his heart was light and his anticipations high. He was eating an apple and giving a long, melodious whoop at intervals, followed by a deep-toned ding-dong-dong, ding-dong-dong, for he was personating a steamboat. As he drew near, he slackened speed, took the middle of the street, leaned far over to starboard, and rounded to ponderously, with a laborious pomp and circumstance, for he was personating the big Missouri, and considered himself to be drawing 9 feet of water. He was boat and captain and engine bells combined. So he had to imagine himself standing on his own hurricane deck, giving the orders and executing them. "Stop her, sir! Ting-a-ling-ling!" The headway almost ran almost out, and he drew up slowly toward the sidewalk. "Ship up to back, ting-a-ling-ling!" His arms straightened and stiffened down his sides. "Get her back on the starboard, ting-a-ling-ling! Chow! Chow! Wow! Chow!" His right hand, meantime, describing stately circles, for it was representing a 40-foot wheel. "Let it go back on the larboard, ting-a-ling-ling! Chow! Chow! Chow!" The left hand began to describe circles. "Stop the starboard, ting-a-ling-ling! Stop the larboard! Come ahead on the starboard! Stop her! Let your outside turn over slow, ting-a-ling-ling! Chow! Ow! Ow! Get out that headline! Lively now! Come! Out with your spring line! What do you do over there? Take a turn around that stump with the bright of it. Stand by that stage now. Let it go. Done with the engine, sir. Ting-a-ling-ling! Shh! Shh! Shh!" Trying to gauge Cox. Tom went on whitewashing, paid no attention to the steamboat. Ben stared a moment and then said, "Hi ye! You're up a stump, ain't you?" No answer. Tom surveyed his last touch with the eye of an artist. Then he gave his brush another gentle sweep and surveyed the result. As before, Ben ranged up alongside of him. Tom's mouth watered for the apple, but he stuck to his work. Ben said, "Hello, old chap. You got to work, eh?" Tom wheeled suddenly and said, "Why, is you, Ben? I wasn't noticing." "Say, I'm going in a swimming, I am. Don't you wish you could? But you But of course, you'd rather work, wouldn't you? Of course you would. Tom contemplated the boy a bit and said, "What do you call work? Why, ain't that work?" Tom resumed his whitewashing and answered carelessly, "Well, maybe it is, maybe it ain't. All I know is, it suits Tom Sawyer." "Oh, come now. You don't mean to let on like that you like it?" The brush continued to move. "Like it? Well, I don't see why I oughtn't to like it. Does a boy get a chance to whitewash a fence every day?" That put the thing in a new light. Ben stopped nibbling his apple. Tom swept his brush daintily back and forth, stepped back to note the effect, added a touch here and there, criticized the effect again. Ben, watching every move and getting more and more interested, more and more absorbed. Presently he said, "Say, Tom, let me whitewash a little." Tom considered, was about to consent, but he altered his mind. No, I reckon it wouldn't hardly do, Ben. You see, Aunt Polly's awfully particular about this fence. Right here on the street, you know. But if it was the back fence, I wouldn't mind it, and she wouldn't. Yes, she's awful particular about this fence. It's got to be done very careful. I reckon there ain't one boy in 1,000, maybe 2,000, that can do it the way it's got to be done." "No, is that so? Oh, come now, let me just try it. Only just a little. I'd let you, if you was me, Tom." "Ben, I'd like to, honest Injun, but Aunt Polly, well, Jim wanted to do it, but she wouldn't let him. Sid wanted to do it, but she wouldn't let Sid. Now, don't you see how I'm fixed? If you was to tackle this fence and anything was to happen to it, oh shucks, I'll just be just careful. Now, let me try. Say, I'll give you the core of my apple." "Well, here. No, Ben, now don't. I'm afeard. I'll give you all of it." Tom gave up the brush with reluctance in his face, but alacrity in his heart. And while the late steamer Big Missouri worked and sweated in the sun, the retired artist sat on a barrel in the shade close by, dangled his legs, munched his apple, and planned the slaughter of more innocents. There was no lack of material. Boys happened along every little while. They came to jeer, but remained to whitewash. By the time Ben was found out, Tom had traded the next chance to Billy Fisher for a kite, in good repair. And when he played out, Johnny Miller bought in for a dead rat and a string to swing it with, and so on. And so on, hour after hour. And when the middle of the afternoon came, from being a poor, poverty-stricken boy in the morning, Tom was literally rolling in wealth. He had, besides the things before mentioned, 12 marbles, part of a jew's harp, a piece of blue bottle glass to look through, a spool cannon, a key that wouldn't unlock anything, a fragment of chalk, a glass stopper of a decanter, a tin soldier, a couple of Okay, I think we're back. Yep. For just a couple seconds, mind. Okay, yep, we're all right. He had a nice, good, idle time all the while, plenty of company, and the fence had 3 coats of whitewash on it. If he hadn't run out of whitewash, he would have bankrupted every boy in the village. Tom said to himself that it was not such a hollow world after all. He had discovered a great law of human action without knowing it, namely, that in order to make a man or a boy covet a thing, it is only necessary to make the thing difficult to attain. If he had been a great and wise philosopher like the writer of this book, he would now have comprehended that work consists of whatever a body is obliged to do, and that play consists of whatever a body is not obliged to do. And this would help him to understand why constructing artificial flowers or performing on a treadmill is work, while rolling 10 pins or climbing Mont Blanc is only amusement. There are wealthy gentlemen in England who drive 4-horse passenger coaches 20 or 30 miles on a daily line in the summer because the privilege costs them considerable money. But if they were offered wages for the service, they would turn it into work, and then they would resign. The boy mused a while over the substantial change which had taken place in his worldly circumstances, and then wended toward headquarters to report. And that is the end of chapter 2. So that is the very famous scene that we get with the painting of the fence and convincing the neighborhood lads to chip in, because he's having so much fun doing it that they should have fun too. And wouldn't you know it, he got quite a haul out of it. Marbles, bits of string, a dead rat on a string. Would you? Wow, what a wealth of worldly treasures. All right, let's continue now with chapter 3. Tom presented himself before Aunt Polly, who was sitting by an open window in a pleasant rearward apartment, which was bedroom, breakfast room, dining room, and library combined. The balmy summer air, the restful quiet, the odor of the flowers, and the drowsing murmur of the bees had had their effect, and she was nodding over her knitting, for she had no company but the cat, and it was asleep in her lap. Her spectacles were propped up on her gray head for safety. She had thought that, of course, Tom had deserted long ago, and she wondered at seeing him place himself in her power again in this intrepid way. He said, "Mayn't I go and play now, Aunt?" "What, already? How much you done?" "It's all done, Aunt." "Tom, don't lie to me. I can't bear it." "I ain't. It is all done." Aunt Polly placed small trust in such evidence. She went out to see for herself, and she would have been content to find 20% of Tom's statement true, when she found the entire fence whitewashed. And not only whitewashed, but elaborately coated and recoated, and even a streak added to the ground. Her astonishment was almost unspeakable. She said, "Well, I never. There's no getting around it. You can work when you mind to, Tom." And then she diluted the compliment by adding, "But it's powerful seldom you a mind to, I'm bound to say. Well, go along and play, but mind you get back sometime in a week, or I'll tan you." She was so overcome by the splendor of his achievement that she took him into the closet and selected a choice apple and delivered it to him, along with an improving lecture upon the added value and flavor a treat took to itself when it came without sin, through virtuous effort. And while she closed with a happy scriptural flourish, he hooked a donut. Then he skipped out and saw Sid just starting up the outside stairway that led to the back rooms on the second floor. Clods were handy, and the air was full of them in a twinkling. They raged about Sin like a hailstorm, and before Aunt Polly could collect her surprised faculties and sally to the rescue, 6 or 7 clods had taken personal effect, and Tom was over the fence and gone. There was a gate, but as a general thing, he was too crowded for time to make use of it. His soul was at peace, now that he had settled with Sid for calling attention to his black thread and getting him into trouble. Tom skirted the block and came round into a muddy alley that led by the back of his aunt's cow stable. He presently got safely beyond the reach of capture and punishment, and hastened toward the public square of the village, where 2 military companies of boys had met for conflict, according to previous appointment. Tom was general of one of these armies. Joe Harper, a bosom friend, general of the other. These 2 great commanders did not condescend to fight in person, that being better suited to the still smaller fry, but sat together on an eminence and conducted the field operations by orders delivered through aides de camp. Tom's army won a great victory after a long and hard-fought battle. Then the dead were counted, prisoners exchanged, the terms of the next disagreement agreed upon, and the day for the necessary battle appointed. After which the armies fell into line and marched away, and Tom turned homeward alone. As he was passing by the house where Jeff Thatcher lived, he saw a new girl in the garden. A lovely little blue-eyed creature with yellow hair plaited into 2 long tails, white summer frock and embroidered pantalettes. The fresh-crowned hero fell without firing a shot. A certain Amy Lawrence vanished out of his heart and left not even a memory of herself behind. He had thought he loved her to distraction. He had regarded his passion as adoration. And behold, it was only a little evanescent partiality. He had been months winning her. She had confessed hardly a week ago, and he had been the happiest and the proudest boy in the world only 7 short days. And here, in one instant of time, she was gone out of his heart like a casual stranger whose visit is done. He worshipped this new angel with furtive eye, till he saw that she had discovered him. Then he pretended he did not know she was present and began to show off in all sorts of absurd, boyish ways in order to win her admiration. He kept up this grotesque foolishness for some time, but by and by, while he was in the midst of some dangerous gymnastic performances, he glanced aside and saw that the little girl was wending her way toward the house. Tom came up to the fence and leaned on it, grieving and hoping she would tarry yet a while longer. She halted a moment on the steps and then moved toward the door. Tom heaved a great sigh as she put her foot on the threshold, but his face lit up right away, for she tossed a pansy over the fence a moment before she disappeared. The boy ran around and stopped within a foot or 2 of the flower, and then shaded his eyes with his hand and began to look down the street as if he had discovered something of interest going on in that direction. Presently, he picked up a straw and began to balance it on his nose, with his head tilted far back, and as he moved from side to side in his efforts, he edged nearer and nearer toward the pansy. Finally, his bare foot rested upon it, his pliant toes closed upon it, and he hopped away with the treasure and disappeared round the corner. But only for a minute, only while he could button the flower inside his jacket, next his heart, or next his stomach, possibly, for he was not much posted in anatomy, and not hypercritical anyway. He returned now, and hung about the fence till nightfall, showing off, as before. But the girl never exhibited herself again, though Tom comforted himself with a little, with the hope that she had been near some window meantime, and been aware of his attentions. Finally, he strode home reluctantly, with his poor head full of visions. All through supper his spirits were so high that his aunt wondered what had got into the child. He took a good scolding about clotting Sid, and did not seem to mind it in the least. He tried to steal sugar under his aunt's very nose, and got his knuckles rapped for it. He said, you don't whack Sid when he takes it. Well, Sid don't torment anybody the way you do. You'd be always into that sugar if I weren't watching you. Presently, she stepped into the kitchen, and Sid, happy in his immunity, reached for the sugar bowl, a sort of glorying over Tom, which was well nigh unbearable. But Sid's fingers slipped, and the bowl dropped and broke. Tom was in ecstasies, in such ecstasies that he even controlled his tongue and was silent. He said to himself that he would not speak a word, even when his aunt came in, but would sit perfectly still till she asked who did the mischief. And then he would tell, and there would be nothing so good in the world as to see that pet model catch it. He was so brimful of exultation that he could hardly hold himself when the old lady came back and stood above the wreck, discharging lightnings of wrath from over her spectacles. He said to himself, now it's coming. In the next instant, he was sprawling on the floor. The potent palm was uplifted to strike again when Tom cried out, hold on now. What are you belting me for? Sid broke it. Aunt Polly paused, perplexed, and Tom looked for healing pity. But when she got her tongue again, she only said, Well, you didn't get a lick, miss, I reckon. You been into some other audacious mischief when I wasn't around, like enough." Then her conscience reproached her, and she yearned to say something kind and loving, but she judged that this would be construed into a confession that she had been in the wrong, and discipline forbade that. So she kept silence and went about her affairs with a troubled heart. Tom sulked in a corner and exalted his woes. He knew that in her heart his aunt was on her knees to him, and he was morosely gratified by the consciousness of it. He would hang out no signals. He would take no notice of none. He knew that a yearning glance fell upon him, now and then, through a film of tears, but he refused recognition of it. He pictured himself lying sick unto death, and his aunt bending over him, beseeching one little forgiving word. But he would turn his face to the wall and die with that word unsaid. Ah, how would she feel then? And he pictured himself brought home from the river, dead with his curls all wet and his sore heart at rest. How she would throw herself upon him, and how her tears would fall like rain, and her lips pray God to give her back her boy, and she would never abuse him any more. But he would lie there cold and white and make no sign, a poor little sufferer whose griefs were at an end. He so worked upon his feelings with the pathos of these dreams that he had to keep swallowing. He was so like to choke, and his eyes swam in a blur of water, which overflowed when he winked, and ran down and trickled from the end of his nose, and such a luxury to him was this petting of his sorrows, that he could not bear to have any worldly cheeriness or any grating delight intrude upon it. It was too sacred for such contact. And so, presently, when his cousin Mary danced in, all alive with joy and seeing home again after an age-long visit of 1 week to the country, he got up and moved in clouds and darkness, out at one door as she brought song and sunshine at the other. He wandered far from the accustomed haunts of boys and sought desolate places that were in harmony with his spirit. A log raft in the river invited him, and he seated himself on its outer edge and contemplated the dreary vastness of the stream, wishing the while that he could only be drowned, all at once and unconsciously, without undergoing the uncomfortable routine devised by nature. Then he thought of his flower. He got it out, rumpled and wilted, and it mightily increased his dismal felicity. He wondered if she would pity him if she knew. Would she cry and wish that she had a right to put her arms around his neck and comfort him? Or would she turn coldly away, like all the hollow world? This picture brought such an agony of pleasurable suffering that he worked it over and over again in his mind and set it up in new and varied lights, till he wore it threadbare. At last, he rose up, sighing, and departed in the darkness. About 9:30 or 10 o'clock, he came along the deserted street to where the adored unknown lived. He paused a moment. No sound fell upon his listening ear. A candle was casting a dull glow upon the curtain of a second-story window. Was the sacred presence there? He climbed the fence, threaded his stealthy way through the plants, till he stood under that window. He looked up at it long and with emotion. Then he laid him down on the ground under it, disposing himself upon his back, with his hands clasped over his breast and holding his poor wilted flower. And thus he would die, out in the cold world, with no shelter over his homeless head, no friendly hand to wipe the death damps from his brow, no loving face to bend pityingly over him when the great agony came. And thus she would see him when she looked out upon the glad morning, and oh, would she drop one little tear upon his poor, lifeless form? Would she heave one little sigh to see a bright young life so rudely blighted, so untimely cut down? The window went up, a maidservant's discordant voice profaned the holy calm, and a deluge of water drenched the prone martyr's remains. The strangling hero sprang up with a relieving snort. There was a whiz as of a missile in the air, mingled with the murmur of a curse. A sound as of a shivering glass followed, and a small, vague form went over the fence and shot away in the gloom. Not long after, as Tom, all undressed for bed, was surveying his drenched garments by the light of a tallow dip, Sid woke up. But if he had any dim idea of making any references to illusions, he thought better of it and held his peace, for there was danger in Tom's eye. Tom turned in without the added vexation of prayers, and Sid made mental note of the omission. And that brings us to the end of chapter 3, where a boy's melodrama is unmatched. That was all sorts of extra. You know what? It's now that I'm thinking about it, kids do tend to do that, don't they? Just some small inconvenience gets blown into the absolute end of the world and civilization and life as they know it, because they lost a toy, or they missed the last piece of a cake or something. Yeah, for sure. It's trying to engulf yourself in sorrow to feel something. All right, let's get through another chapter because these are pretty short. I will reveal they feel short because there are a lot of pictures in this one. This edition of the book that I've got seems to have like a scan of all of the original edition's drawings, and that was really common with, at least for this book, but pretty commonly throughout a lot of them. They're like half of a page will be taken up by an illustration at the start of each chapter and throughout the pages. So there's a lot going on, and there's just far too much for me to take pictures of all of them and put them up on stream. So I'll know, and you'll get to wonder. I say that, but this is the first, or the most popular download for Tom Sawyer and for Mark Twain in general on Project Gutenberg. So if you care to follow along and see the pictures yourself, you are certainly welcome. All right, let's get through one more chapter before we take a quick break. Chapter 4. The sun arose upon a tranquil world and beamed down upon the peaceful village like a benediction. Breakfast over, Aunt Polly had family worship. It began with a prayer built from the ground up of solid courses of scriptural quotations, welded together with a thin mortar of originality. And from the summit of this, she delivered a grim chapter of the Mosaic Law, as from Sinai. Then Tom girded up his loins, so to speak, and went to work to get his verses. Sid had learned his lesson days before. Tom bent all his energies to the memorizing of 5 verses, and he chose part of the Sermon on the Mount, because he could find no verses that were shorter. At the end of half an hour, Tom had a vague, general idea of his lesson, but no more, for his mind was traversing the whole field of human thought, and his hands were busy with distracting recreations. Mary took his book to hear him recite, and he tried to find his way through the fog. Blessed are the, poor. Yes, poor. Blessed are the poor, in spirit. In spirit. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for they theirs, for theirs. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they, S-H-A, for they, S-H, oh, I don't know what he is, shall, shall, for they shall, shall mourn, blessed are they that shall mourn, for they shall, what? Why don't you tell me, Mary? What do you want to be so mean for? Oh, Tom, you poor thick-headed thing. I'm not teasing you, I wouldn't do that. You must go and learn it again. Don't you be so discouraged, Tom, you'll manage it. And if you do, I'll give you something ever so nice. There now, that's a good boy. All right, what is it, Mary? Tell me what it is. Never you mind, Tom. You know if I say it's nice, it is nice. You bet you that's so, Mary. All right, I'll tackle it again. And he did tackle it again. And under the double pressure of curiosity and prospective gain, he did it with such spirit that he accomplished a shining success. Mary gave him a brand new Barlow knife, worth 12.5 cents, and the convulsion of delight that swept through his system shook him to his foundations. True, the knife would not cut anything, but it was a sure enough Barlow, and there was inconceivable grandeur in that. Though, where the Western boys ever got the idea that such a weapon could possibly be counterfeited to its injury is an imposing mystery, and will always remain so, perhaps. Tom contrived to scarify the cupboard with it, and was arranging to begin on the bureau, when he was called off to dress for Sunday school. Mary gave him a tin basin of water and a piece of soap, and he went outside the door to set a basin on a little bench there. Then he dipped the soap in the water and laid it down, turned up his sleeves, poured out the water on the ground gently, and then entered the kitchen and began to wipe his face diligently on the towel behind the door. But Mary removed the towel and said, "Now, ain't you ashamed, Tom? You mustn't be so bad. Water won't hurt you." Tom was a trifle disconcerted. The basin was refilled, but this time he stood over it a little while, gathering resolution, took in a big breath, and began. When he entered the kitchen presently, with both eyes shut and groping for the towel with his hands, an honorable testimony of suds and water was dripping from his face. But when he emerged from the towel, he was not yet satisfactory, but the clean territory stopped short at his chin and his jaws, like a mask. Below and beyond this line there was a dark expanse of unirrigated soil that spread downward in front and backward around his neck. Mary took him in hand, and when she was done with him, he was a man and a brother, without distinction of color, and his saturated hair was neatly brushed, and its short curls wrought into a dainty and symmetrical general effect. He privately smoothed out the curls with labor and difficulty, and plastered his hair close down to his head, for he held curls to be effeminate, and his own filled his life with bitterness. Then Mary got out a suit of his clothing that had been used only on Sundays during 2 years. They were simply called his other clothes, and so by that we know the size of his wardrobe. The girl put him to rights. After he had dressed himself, she buttoned his neat roundabout up to his chin, turned his vast shirt collar down over his shoulders, brushed him off, and crowned him with his speckled straw hat. He now looked exceedingly improved and uncomfortable. He was fully as uncomfortable as he looked, for there was a restraint about whole clothes and cleanliness that galled him. He hoped that Mary would forget his shoes. But the hope was blighted. She coated them thoroughly with tallow, as was the custom, and brought them out. He lost his temper and said he was always being made to do something he didn't want to do, but Mary said persuasively, "Please, Tom, that's a good boy." So he got into the shoes, snarling. Mary was soon ready, and the 3 children set out for Sunday school. a place that Tom hated with his whole heart. But Sid and Mary were fond of it. Sabbath school hours were from 9 to 10:30, and then church service. 2 of the children always remained for the sermon voluntarily, and the other always remained too for stronger reasons. The church's high-backed, uncushioned pews would seat about 300 persons. The edifice was but a small, plain affair, with a sort of pine board tree box on top of it for a steeple. At the door, Tom dropped back a step and accosted a Sunday-dressed comrade. "Say, Billy, got a yaller ticket?" "Yes." "What'll you take for her?" "What'll you give?" "Piece of licorice and a fish hook?" "Let's see 'em." Tom exhibited. They were satisfactory, and the property changed hands. Then Tom traded a couple of white alleys for 3 red tickets, and some small trifle for a couple of blue ones. He waylaid other boys as they came, and went on buying tickets of various colors for 10 or 15 minutes longer. He entered the church now, with a swarm of clean and noisy boys and girls, proceeded to his seat and started a quarrel with the first boy that came. The teacher, a grave elderly man, interfered, then turned his back a moment, and Tom pulled the boy's hair in the next bench, and was absorbed in his book when the boy turned round, stuck a pin in another boy, presently, in order to hear him say "ouch," and got a new reprimand from his teacher. Tom's whole class were of a pattern, restless, noisy, and troublesome. When they came to recite their lessons, not one of them knew his verses perfectly, but had to be prompted all along. However, they worried through, and each got his reward in small blue tickets, each with a passage of scripture on it. Each blue ticket was paid for 2 verses of the recitation. 10 blue tickets equal a red one, and could be exchanged for it. 10 red tickets equaled a yellow one. For 10 yellow tickets, the superintendent gave a very plainly bound Bible, worth 40 cents in those easy times, to the pupil. How many of my readers would have the industry and application to memorize 2,000 verses, even for a Dore Bible? And yet Mary had acquired 2 Bibles in this way. It was the patient work of 2 years, and a boy of German parentage had won 4 or 5. He once recited 3,000 verses without stopping. But the strain upon his mental faculties was too great, and he was little better than an idiot from that day forth. A grievous misfortune for the school, for on great occasions, before company, the superintendent, as Tom expressed it, had always made this boy come out and spread himself. Only the older pupils managed to keep their tickets and stick to their tedious work long enough to get a Bible, and so the delivery of one of those prizes was a rare and noteworthy circumstance. The successful pupil was so great and conspicuous for that day that on the spot every scholar's heart was fired with a fresh ambition that often lasted a couple of weeks. It is possible that Tom's mental stomach had never really hungered for one of those prizes, but unquestionably his entire being had, for many a day, longed for the glory and the eclat that came with it. In due course, the superintendent stood up in front of the pulpit, with a closed hymn book in his hand and his forefinger inserted between its leaves, and commanded attention. When a Sunday school superintendent makes his customary little speech, a hymn book in the hand is as necessary as is the inevitable sheet of music in the hand of a singer who stands forward on the platform and sings a solo at a concert. Though why is a mystery, for neither the hymn book nor the sheet of music is ever referred to by the sufferer. This superintendent was a slim creature of 35, with a sandy goatee and short sandy hair. He wore a stiff standing collar whose upper edge almost reached his ears, and whose sharp points curved forward abreast the corners of his mouth. A fence that compelled a straight look out ahead, and a turning of the whole body when a side view was required. His chin was propped on a spreading cravat which was as broad and as long as a banknote, and had fringed ends. His boot toes were turned sharply up, in the fashion of the day, like sleigh runners, an effect patiently and laboriously produced by the young men by sitting with their toes pressed against a wall for hours together. Mr. Walters was very earnest of mien, and very sincere and honest at heart, and he held sacred things and places in such reverence, and so separated them from worldly matters, that unconsciously, to himself, his Sunday school voice had acquired a peculiar intonation, which was wholly absent on weekdays. He began after this fashion. "Now, children, I want you all to sit up just as straight and pretty as you can, and give me all your attention for a minute or two. There, that is it. That is the way good little boys and girls should do. I see one little girl who is looking out of the window. I am afraid she thinks I am out there somewhere, perhaps up in one of the trees, making a little speech to the little birds." An applausive titter was heard. "I want to tell you how good it makes me feel to see so many bright, clean little faces assembled in a place like this, learning to do right and be good," and so forth and so on. It is not necessary to set down the rest of the oration. It was of a pattern which does not vary, and so it is familiar to us all. The latter third of the speech was marred by the resumption of fights and other recreations among certain of the bad boys, and by fidgetings and whisperings that extended far and wide, washing even to the bases of isolated and incorruptible rocks like Sid and Mary. But now every sound ceased suddenly with the subsidence of Mr. Walters' voice, and the conclusion of the speech was received with a burst of silent gratitude. A good part of the whispering had been occasioned by an event which was more or less rare: the entrance of visitors. Lawyer Thatcher, accompanied by a very feeble and aged man, a fine, portly, middle-aged gentleman with iron gray hair, and a dignified lady who was doubtless the latter's wife. The lady was leading a child. Tom had been restless and full of chafings and repinings, conscience smitten too. He could not meet Amy Lawrence's eye. He could not brook her loving gaze. But when he saw this small newcomer, his soul was all ablaze with bliss in a moment. The next moment he was showing off with all his might, cuffing boys, pulling hair, making faces, in a word, using every art that seemed likely to fascinate a girl and win her applause. His exultation had but one alloy: the memory of his humiliation in this angel's garden. And that record in sand was fast washing out under the waves of happiness that were sweeping over it now. The visitors were given the highest seat of honor, and as soon as Mr. Walters' speech was finished, he introduced them to the school. The middle-aged man turned out to be a prodigious personage, no less a one than the county judge. Altogether the most august creation these children had ever looked upon. And they wondered what kind of material he was made of, and they half wanted to hear him roar, and half were afraid he might too. He was from Constantinople, 12 miles away, so he had traveled and seen the world. These very eyes had looked upon the county courthouse, which was said to have a tin roof. The awe which these reflections inspired was attested by the impressive silence and the ranks of staring eyes. This was the great Judge Thatcher. Brother of their own lawyer, Jeff Thatcher immediately went forward to be familiar with the great man and be envied by the school. It would have been music to his soul to hear the whisperings. "Look at him, Jim. He's going up there. Say, look. He's going to shake hands with him. He is shaking hands with him. By jings! Wouldn't you wish you was Jeff?" Mr. Walters fell to showing off, with all sorts of official bustlings and activities, giving orders, delivering judgments, discharging directions here, there, everywhere that he could find a target. The librarian showed off, running hither and thither with his arms full of books and making a deal of the sputter and fuss that insect authority delights in. The young lady teachers showed off, bending sweetly over pupils that were lately being boxed, lifting pretty warning fingers at bad little boys and patting good ones lovingly. The young gentlemen teachers showed off with small scoldings and other little displays of authority and fine attention to discipline, and most of the teachers of both sexes found business up at the library by the pulpit, and it was business that frequently had to be done over again 2 or 3 times, with much seeming vexation. The little girls showed off in various ways, and the little boys showed off with such diligence that the air was thick with paper wads and the murmur of scufflings. And above it all, the great man sat and beamed a majestic, judicial smile upon all the house, and warmed himself in the sun of his own grandeur, for he was showing off too. There was only one thing wanting to make Mr. Walter's ecstasy complete, and that was a chance to deliver a Bible prize and exhibit a prodigy. Several pupils had a few yellow tickets, but none had enough. He had been around among the star pupils inquiring. He would have given words now to have that German lad back again with a sound mind. And now, at this moment when hope was dead, Tom Sawyer came forward with 9 yellow tickets, 9 red tickets, and 10 blue ones, and demanded a Bible. This was a thunderbolt out of a clear sky. Walters was not expecting an application from this source for the next 10 years. But there was no getting around it. Here were the certified checks, and they were good for their face. Tom was therefore elevated to a place with the judge and the other elect, and the great news was announced from headquarters. It was the most stunning surprise of the decade, and so profound was the sensation that it lifted the new hero up to the judicial one's altitude. And the school had 2 marvels to gaze upon in place of 1. The boys were all eaten up with envy, but those that suffered the bitterest pangs were those who perceived too late that they themselves had contributed to this hated splendor by trading tickets to Tom for the wealth he had amassed in selling whitewashing privileges. These despised themselves as being the dupes of a wily fraud, a guileful snake in the grass. The prize was delivered to Tom with as much effusion as the superintendent could pump up under the circumstances, but it lacked somewhat of the true gush, for the poor fellow's instinct taught him that there was a mystery here that could not well bear the light. Perhaps it was simply preposterous that this boy had warehoused 2,000 sheaves of scriptural wisdom on his premises. A dozen would strain his capacity without a doubt. Amy Lawrence was proud and glad, and she tried to make Tom see it in her face, but he wouldn't look. She wondered then she was just a grain troubled. Next, a dim suspicion came and went. Came again. She watched. A furtive glance told her worlds. And then her heart broke. And she was jealous and angry, and the tears came, and she hated everybody. Tom, most of all, she thought. Tom was introduced to the judge, but his tongue was tied, his breath would hardly come, his heart quaked, partly because of the awful greatness of the man, but mainly because he was her parent. He would have liked to fall down and worship him if it were in the dark. The judge put his hand on Tom's head and called him a fine little man and asked him what his name was. The boy stammered, gasped, and got it out. Tom? No, not Tom. It is Thomas. Ah, that's it. I thought there was more to it, maybe. That's very well. But you've another one, I dare say, and you'll tell it to me, won't you? Tell the gentleman your other name, Thomas, said Walters. And say, sir, you mustn't forget your manners. Thomas Sawyer, sir. That's it. That's a good boy. Fine boy, fine. Manly little fellow. 2,000 verses isn't a great many. Very, very great many. And you never can be sorry for the trouble you took to learn them, for knowledge is worth more than anything there is in the world. It's what makes great men and good men. You'll be a great man and a good man yourself someday, Thomas. And then you'll look back and say, it's all owing to the precious Sunday school privileges of my boyhood. It's all owing to my dear teachers that taught me to learn. It's all owing to the good superintendent who encouraged me and watched over me and gave me a beautiful Bible. A splendid, elegant Bible to keep and have it all for my own always. It's all owing to right bringing up. That is what you will say, Thomas. And you wouldn't take any money for those 2,000 verses. No, you wouldn't. And now, you wouldn't mind telling me and this lady some of the things you learned. No, I know you wouldn't, for we are proud of little boys that learn. Now, no doubt you know the names of all of the 12 disciples. Won't you tell us the names of the first 2 that were appointed? Tom was tugging at a buttonhole and looking sheepish. He blushed now, and his eyes fell. Mr. Walter's heart sank within him. He said to himself, it is not possible that the boy can answer the simplest question. Why did the judge ask him? Yet he felt obliged to speak up and say, answer the gentleman, Thomas. Don't be afraid. Tom still hung fire. Now, I know you'll tell me, said the lady. The names of the first 2 disciples were David and Goliath. Let us draw the curtain of charity over the rest of the scene. And that is the end of chapter 4. That is a fun way to... I like how Twain sort of has a way with projecting the scenes and having a little bit of sort of meta instinct into it, where he's like having the third person or the omniscient reader budge in just a little bit. The narrator can give a little bit of help. All right, let's go ahead and take a few minutes to refresh our drinks, stretch our legs, and be back in just a little while. We're making very good progress in this tonight. It's not quite as long as I thought it was. So we'll see where we get to by the end of the night. But for now, let's take a few minutes to gather ourselves and top up the drinks. I'll be back in just a little while. All right, we are back. And yeah, you're right. Twain is one of those authors that you can just sort of get lost in the sauce. So we'll have to be careful because I do have something at 10 tonight, so we will try to be about on time. We'll see how it works. So let's continue now with chapter 5. About 10:30, the cracked bell of the small church began to ring, and presently the people began to gather for the morning sermon. The Sunday school children distributed themselves about the house and occupied pews with their parents, so as to be under supervision. Aunt Polly came, and Tom and Sid and Mary sat with her, Tom being placed next the aisle, in order that he might be as far away from the open window and the seductive outside summer scenes as possible. The crowd filed up the aisles, the aged and needy postmaster, who had seen better days, the mayor and his wife, for they had a mayor there, among other unnecessaries, the justice of the peace, the widow Douglas, fair, smart, and 40, a generous, good-hearted soul and well-to-do, her hill mansion the only palace in the town, and the most hospitable, and much the most lavish in the matter of festivities that St. Petersburg could boast. The bent and venerable Major and Mrs. Ward, Lawyer Riverson, the new notable from a distance. Next, the belle of the village, followed by a troop of lawn-clad and ribbon-decked young heartbreakers. Then all the young clerks in town in a body, for they had stood in the vestibule sucking their cane heads, a circling wall of oiled and simpering admirers, till the last girl had run their gauntlet. And last of all came the model boy, Willie Mufferson, taking as heedful care of his mother as if she were cut glass. He always brought his mother to church, and was the pride of all the matrons. The boys all hated him. He was so good. And besides, he had been thrown up to them so much. His white handkerchief was hanging out of his pocket behind, as usual on Sundays, accidentally. Tom had no handkerchief, and he looked upon boys who had as snobs. The congregation being fully assembled now, the bell rang once more, to warn laggards and stragglers, and then a solemn hush fell upon the church, which was only broken by the tittering and whispering of the choir in the gallery. The choir always tittered and whispered all through the service. There was once a church choir that was not ill-bred, but I have forgotten where it was now. It was a great many years ago, and I can scarcely remember anything about it, but I think it was in some foreign country. The minister gave out the hymn, and read it through with a relish in a peculiar style which was much admired in that part of the country. His voice began on a medium key, and climbed steadily up till it reached a certain point, where it bore with strong emphasis upon the topmost word, and then plunged down, as if from a springboard. Shall I be carried to the skies on flowery beds of ease, whilst others fight to win the prize and sail through bloody seas? He was regarded as a wonderful reader. At church sociables, he was always called upon to read poetry, and when he was through, the ladies would lift up their hands and let them fall helplessly in their laps, and wall their eyes and shake their heads, as much to say, words cannot express it. It is too beautiful for this mortal earth. After the hymn had been sung, the Reverend Mr. Sprague turned himself into a bulletin board and read off notices of meetings and societies and things till it seemed that the list would stretch out to the crack of doom. A queer custom which is still kept up in America, even in cities, away here in this age of abundant newspapers. Often, the less there is to justify a traditional custom, the harder it is to get rid of it. And now, the minister prayed. A good, generous prayer it was, and went into details. It pleaded for the church and the little children of the church, for the other churches of the village, and for the village itself, for the county, for the state officers, for the United States, for the churches of the United States, for Congress, for the president, for the officers of the government, for poor sailors tossed by stormy seas, for the oppressed millions groaning under the heel of European monarchies and Oriental despotisms, for such as have the light and the good tidings, and yet have not eyes to see nor ears to hear withal, for the heathen in the far islands of the sea, and closed with a supplication that the words he was about to speak might find grace and favor, and be as seed sown in fertile ground, yielding in time a grateful harvest of good. Amen. There was a rustling of dresses, and the standing congregation sat down. The boy whose history this book relates did not enjoy the prayer. He only endured it, if he even did that much. He was restive all through it. He kept tally of the details of the prayer unconsciously, for he was not listening, but he knew the ground of old, and the clergyman's regular route over it. And when a little trifle of new matter was interlarded, his ear detected it, and his whole nature resented it. He considered additions unfair and scoundrelly. In the midst of the prayer, a fly had lit on the back of the pew in front of him, and tortured his spirit by calmly rubbing its hands together, embracing its head with its arms, and polishing it so vigorously that it seemed almost part company with the body, and the slender thread of a neck was exposed to view, scraping its wings with its hind legs and smoothing them to its body, as if it had been coattails, going through its whole toilet as tranquilly as if it knew it was perfectly safe. As indeed it was, for as sorely as Tom's hands itched to grab for it, they did not dare. He believed his soul would be instantly destroyed if he did such a thing while the prayer was going on. But with the closing sentence, his hand began to curve and steal forward, and the instant the amen was out, the fly was a prisoner of war. His aunt detected the act and made him let it go. The minister gave out his text and droned along monotonously through an argument that was so prosy, and that many a head by and by began to nod. And yet it was an argument that dealt in limitless fire and brimstone, and thinned the predestined elect down to a company so small as to be hardly worth the saving. Tom counted the pages of the sermon. After church, he always knew how many pages there had been, but he seldom knew anything else about the discourse. However, this time, he was really interested for a little while. The minister made a grand and moving picture of the assembling together of the world's hosts at the millennium, and the lion and the lamb should lie down together, and a little child should lead them. But the pathos, the lesson, the moral of the great spectacle were lost upon the boy. He only thought of the conspicuousness of the principal character before the onlooking nations. His face lit with the thought, and he said to himself that he wished he could be that child, if it was a tame lion. Now, he lapsed into suffering again, as the dry argument was resumed. Presently, he bethought him of a treasure he had and got it out. It was a large black beetle with formidable jaws, a pinch bug, he called it. It was in a percussion cap box. First thing the beetle did was to take him by the finger. A natural fillip followed. The beetle went floundering into the aisle and lit on its back, and the hurt finger went into the boy's mouth. The beetle lay there working its helpless legs, unable to turn over. Tom eyed it and longed for it, but it was safe out of his reach. Other people, uninterested in the sermon, found relief in the beetle, and they eyed it too. Presently, a vagrant poodle dog came idling along, sad at heart, lazy with the summer softness and the quiet, weary of captivity, sighing for change. He spied the beetle. The drooping tail lifted and wagged. He surveyed the prize, walked around it, smelt at it from a safe distance, walked around it again, grew bolder and took a closer smell, then lifted his lip and made a gingerly snatch at it, just missing it. Made another and another. Began to enjoy the diversion, subsided to his stomach with the beetle between his paws, and continued his experiments. Grew weary at last, and then indifferent and absent-minded. His head nodded, and little by little his chin descended and touched the enemy, who seized it. There was a sharp yelp, a flirt of the poodle's head, and the beetle fell a couple of yards away and lit on its back once more. The neighboring spectators shook with a gentle inward joy. Several faces went behind fans and handkerchiefs, and Tom was entirely happy. The dog looked foolish, and probably felt so, but there was resentment in his heart too, and a craving for revenge. So he went to the beetle and began a wary attack on it again, jumping at it from every point of a circle, lighting with its forepaws within an inch of the creature, making even ever closer snatches at it with his teeth, and jerking his head till his ears flapped again. But he grew tired once more after a while. Tried to amuse himself with a fly, but found no relief. Followed an ant around with his nose close to the floor, and quickly wearied of that. Yawned, sighed, forgot the beetle entirely, and sat down on it. There was a wild yelp of agony, and the poodle went sailing up the aisle. The yelps continued, and so did the dog. He crossed the house in front of the altar. He flew down the other aisle. He crossed before the doors. He clambered up the home stretch. His anguish grew with his progress, till presently he was but a woolly comet, moving in its orbit with the gleam of the speed of light. At last, the frantic sufferer sheered from its course and sprang into his master's lap. He flung it out the window, and the voice of distress quickly thinned away and died in the distance. By this time, the whole church was red-faced and suffocating with suppressed laughter, and the sermon had come to a dead standstill. The discourse was resumed presently, but it went lame and halting, all possibility of impressiveness being at an end, for even the gravest sentiments were constantly being received with a smothered burst of unholy mirth under the cover of some remote pewback, as if the poor person had said a rarely facetious thing. It was a genuine relief to the whole congregation when the ordeal was over and the benediction pronounced. Tom Sawyer went home quite cheerful, thinking to himself that there was some satisfaction about divine service when there was a bit of variety in it. He had but one marring thought. He was willing that the dog should play with his pinch bug, but he did not think it was upright in him to carry it off. And that is the end of chapter 5. I will readily admit, I've sat through some church services, some sermons that I wish a beetle would pinch a poodle and wreak havoc throughout the sanctuary, if only to get things a little bit of life. Exactly. It's like, damn. It's just, that is exactly, like, that's life. We all just wish for a little bit of spice. Alright, let's try and get through one or two more chapters. It's hard to gauge how long these are going to take because the pages are very inconsistent. Like, this next one is like 15 pages long, but the chapter itself doesn't start until page 3, which is a little interesting. So, we'll see how long it takes us to get through one more. Monday morning, chapter 6, I should say. Monday morning, found Tom Sawyer miserable. Monday morning always found him so, because it began another week's slow suffering in school. He generally began that day with wishing he had had no intervening holiday. It made the going into captivity in fetters again so much more odious. Tom lay thinking. Presently, it occurred to him that he wished he was sick. Then he could stay home from school. Here was a vague possibility. He canvassed the system. No ailment was found. He investigated again. This time, he thought he could detect colicky symptoms. He began to encourage them with considerable hope. But they soon grew feeble and presently died wholly away. He reflected further. Suddenly, he discovered something. One of his upper front teeth was loose. This was lucky. He was about to begin to groan as a starter, as he called it. Then, when it occurred to him that if he came into court with that argument, his aunt would pull it out, and that would hurt. So he thought he would hold the tooth in reserve for the present and seek further. Nothing offered for some little time, and then he remembered hearing the doctor tell about a certain thing that laid up a patient for 2 or 3 weeks and threatened to make him lose a finger. So the boy eagerly drew his sore toe from under the sheet and held it up for inspection. But now he did not know the necessary symptoms. However, it seemed well worthwhile to chance it. So he fell to groaning with considerable spirit. But Sid slept on, unconscious. Tom groaned louder and fancied that he had begun to feel pain in the toe. No result from Sid. Tom was panting with his exertions by this time. He took a rest, then swelled himself up and fetched a succession of admirable moans. Sid snowed on. Tom was aggravated. He said, "Sid, Sid!" and shook him. This course worked well, and Tom began to groan again. Sid yawned, stretched, then brought himself up on his elbow with a snort and began to stare at Tom. Tom went on groaning. Sid said, "Tom, say, Tom." No response. "Here, Tom, Tom, what is the matter, Tom?" He shook his head and looked in his face anxiously. Tom moaned out, "Oh, don't, Sid. Don't jaw with me." "Why, what's the matter, Tom? I must call Auntie." "No, never mind. It'll be over by and by, maybe. Don't call anybody." "But I must. Don't groan so, Tom. It's awful. How long you been this way?" "Hours. Ouch. Oh, don't stir so, Sid. You'll kill me." "Tom, why didn't you wake me sooner?" "Oh, Tom, don't. It makes my flesh crawl to hear you. Tom, what is the matter?" "I forgive you everything, Sid. Everything you ever done to me when I'm gone. Oh, Tom, don't. You ain't dying, are you? Don't, Tom. Oh, don't. Maybe. I'll forgive everybody, Sid. Tell them so, Sid. And Sid, you give my window sash and my cat with one eye to that new girl that's come to town. Tell her." But Sid had snatched his clothes and gone. Tom was suffering in reality now. So handsomely was his imagination working, and so his groans had gathered quite a genuine tone. Sid flew downstairs and said, "Oh, Aunt Polly, come. Tom's dying." "Dying?" "Yes'm. Don't wait. Come quick. Rubbish. I don't believe it." But she fled upstairs nevertheless, with Sid and Mary at her heels, and her face grew white too, and her lip trembled, and she reached the bedside. She gasped out, "You, Tom! Tom! What's the matter with you?" "Oh, Auntie, what's the matter with you? What is the matter with you, child?" "Oh, Auntie, my sore toe's mortified." The old lady sank down into a chair and laughed a little, then cried a little, then did both together. This restored her, and she said, "Tom, what a turn you did give me. Now, you shut up that nonsense and climb out of this. The groans ceased, and the pain vanished from the toe. The boy felt a little foolish and said, Aunt Polly, it seemed mortifying and hurt so I never minded my tooth at all. Your tooth indeed! What's the matter with your tooth? One of them's loose, and it aches perfectly awful. There now. Don't begin that groan again. Open your mouth. Well, your tooth is loose, but you're not going to dive out there. Mary, give me a silk thread and a chunk of fire out the kitchen. Tom said, Oh, well, please, Auntie, don't pull it out. It don't hurt anymore. I wish I may never stir if it does. Please don't, Auntie. I don't want to stay home from school. Oh, you don't you? So all this row was because you thought you'd get to stay home from school and go fishing? Tom, I love you so. You seem to try every way you can to break my old heart with your outrageousness. By this time, the dental instruments were ready. The old lady made one end of the silk thread fast to Tom's tooth with a loop and tied the other to the bedpost. Then she seized the chunk of fire and suddenly thrust it almost into the boy's face. The tooth hung dangling by the bedpost now. Damn, okay, yeah, that's one way to do it. But all trials bring their compensations. As Tom wended to school after breakfast, he was the envy of every boy he met because the gap in his upper row of teeth enabled him to expectorate in a new and admirable way. He gathered quite a following of lads interested in the exhibition, and one that had cut his finger and had been a center of fascination and homage up to this time now found himself suddenly without an adherent, and shone in his glory. His heart was heavy, and he said with a disdain which he did not feel, and it wasn't anything to spit like Tom Sawyer, but another boy said, Sour grapes! He wandered away a dismantled hero. Shortly, Tom came upon the juvenile pariah of the village, Huckleberry Finn. Son of the town drunkard, Huckleberry was cordially hated and dreaded by all the mothers of the town, because he was idle and lawless and vulgar and bad, and because all their children admired him so, and delighted in his forbidden society, and wished they dared to be like him. Tom was like the rest of the respectable boys, in that he envied Huckleberry in his gaudy outcast condition, and was under strict orders not to play with him. So he played with him every time he got a chance. Huckleberry was always dressed in the cast-off clothes of full-grown men, and they were in perennial bloom and fluttering with rags. His hat was a vast ruin, with a wide crescent lopped out of his brim. His coat, when he wore one, hung nearly to his heels, and had the rearward buttons far down his back, but one suspender supported his trousers. The seat of the trousers bagged low and contained nothing. The fringed legs dragged in the dirt when not rolled up. Huckleberry came and went, at his own free will. He slept on doorsteps in fine weather and in empty hogsheads in wet. He did not have to go to school or to church, or call any being master or obey anybody. He can go fishing or swimming when and where he chose, and stay as long as it suited him. Nobody forbade him to fight. He could sit up as late as he pleased. He was always the first boy that went barefoot in spring and the last to resume leather in the fall. Never had to wash, nor put on clean clothes. He could swear wonderfully. In a word, everything that goes to make life precious, that boy had. So thought every harassed, hampered, respectable boy in St. Petersburg. Tom hailed the romantic outcast. Hello, Huckleberry. Hello yourself. Let's see how you like it. What's that you got, dear cat? Let me see him, Huck. My, he's pretty stiff. Where'd you get him? Bought him off of a boy. What'd you give? I give blue ticket and a bladder that I got at the slaughterhouse. Where'd you get the blue ticket? I bought it off of Ben Rogers 2 weeks ago for a hoop stick. Say, What's dead cats good for, Huck? Good for? Cure warts with. No, is that so? I know something's better. I bet you don't. What is it? Why, spunk water. Spunk water? I wouldn't give a darn for spunk water. You wouldn't, would you? Did you ever try it? No, I ain't. Bob Tanner did. Who told you so? Why, he told Jeff Thatcher, and Jeff told Johnny Baker, and Johnny told Jim Hollis, and Jim told Ben Rogers, and Ben told the Negro, and the nigger told me. There now. Well, what of it? They'll all lie, leastwise, all but the Negro. I don't know him, but I never seen a Negro that wouldn't lie. Shucks. Now you tell me how Bob Tanner done it, Huck. Quick aside, that was a rapid fire of names, and sliced into the names were a couple of those slurs that we were talking about. So it took a great deal of discretion to, on the fly, keep the pace there. Why, he took and dipped his hand in a rotten stump where the rainwater was. In the daytime, certainly. With his face to the stump? Yes, at least I reckon so. Did he say anything? I don't reckon he did. I don't know. Aha! Talk about trying to cure warts with spunk water. Such a blame fool way is that. Why, that ain't going to do any good. You got to do it all by yourself. To the middle of the woods, where you know there's a spunk water stump, and just as it's midnight, you back up against the stump and jam your hand in and say, barleycorn, engine meal shorts, spunk water, swallow these warts. And then walk away quick, 11 steps with your eyes shut, and turn around 3 times. Walk home without speaking to anybody. Because if you speak, charm's busted. Well, that sounds like a good way. But that ain't the way Bob Tanner done. No, sir, you can bet he didn't. Because he's the wartiest boy in this town. He wouldn't have a wart on him if he knew how to work spunk water. I've took off thousands of warts off my hands that way, Huck. I play with frogs so much that I've always got a considerable many warts. Sometimes I take them off with a bean. Yep, bean's good. I done that. Have you? What's your way? You take and split the bean, and you cut the wart so as to get some blood. Then you put the blood on one piece of the bean and take and dig a hole and bury it. About midnight at the crossroads in the dark of the moon. And then you burn up the rest of the bean. You see that piece that's got the blood on it will keep drawing and trying to fetch the other piece to it. So that helps the blood to draw the wart. And pretty soon, off she comes. Yes, that's it, Huck. That's it. Though, when you're burying it, if you say down being off work, come no more to bother me, it's better. That's the way Joe Harper does, and he's been nailing the coonville in the most everywheres. But say, how do you cure them with dead cats? Why, you take your cat, you go and get in the graveyard, along about midnight, when somebody that was wicked has been buried. And when it's midnight, a devil will come, maybe 2 or 3, but you can't see him. You can only hear something like the wind, maybe hear him talk. And when they're talking, taking that fella away, you heave your cat after him and say, devil follow corpse, cat follow devil, warts follow cat, I'm done with you. They'll fetch any wart. Sounds right. Did you ever try it, Huck? No, but old Mother Hopkins told me. Well, I reckon it's so, because they say she's a witch. Say? Why, Tom, I know she is. She witched Pep. Pep says so his own self. He come along one day and he said, see, she was a witching him, so he took up a rock. If she hadn't dodged, he'd have got her. Well, that very night, he rolled off in a shed where he was laying drunk and broke his arm. Why, that's awful. How did he know she was witching him? Lord, Pep can tell easy. Pep says when they keep looking at you right steady, they're witching you. Especially if they mumble. Because when they mumble, they're saying the Lord's prayer backwards. Say, Hucky, when you going to try to cat? Tonight, I reckon. They'll come after old Hoss Williams tonight. But they buried him Saturday. Didn't they get him Saturday night? Why, how you talk? How come their charms work till midnight? And then it's Sunday. The devil don't slosh around much of a Sunday, I don't reckon. I never thought of that. That's so. Let me go with you? Of course, if you ain't afeard. Afeard? 'Tain't likely. Will you meow? Yes, and you meow back, if you get a chance. Last time you kept me a-meowing around till Hayes went off throwing rocks at me and says, "Darn that cat!" And so I hove a brick through his window. But don't you tell. I won't. I couldn't meow that night because Auntie was watching me. But I'll meow this time. Say, what's that? Nothing but a tick. Where'd you get him? Out in the woods. What did you take for him? I don't know. I don't want to steal him. All right. It's a mighty small tick anyway. Oh, anybody can run down a tick that don't belong to them. I'm satisfied with it. It's a good enough tick for me. Sure, there's ticks plenty. 1,000 of them if I want them. Well, why don't you? Because you might as well you can't. This is a pretty early tick, I reckon. It's the first one I've seen this year. Say, Huck, I'll give you my tooth for him. Let's see it. Tom got out a bit of paper and carefully unrolled it. Huckleberry viewed it wistfully. Temptation was very strong. At last he says, "Is it genuine?" Tom lifted his lip and showed the vacancy. "Well, all right," said Huckleberry. "It's a trade." Tom enclosed the tick in the percussion cap box that had been lately the Pinchbug's prison, and the boys separated, each feeling wealthier than before. When Tom reached the little isolated frame schoolhouse, he strode in briskly, with the manner of one who had come with all honest speed. He hung his hat on a peg and flung himself into his seat with business-like alacrity. The master, throned on high in his great splint-bottom armchair, was dozing, lulled by the drowsy hum of study. The interruption roused him. "Thomas Sawyer!" Tom knew when his name was pronounced in full it meant trouble. "Sir? Come up here. Now, sir, why are you late again? As usual." Tom was about to take refuge in a lie when he saw 2 long nails of yellow hair hanging down a back that he recognized by the electric sympathy of love. And by that form was the only vacant place on the girls' side of the schoolhouse. He instantly said, "I stopped to talk with Huckleberry Finn." The master's pulse stood still, and he stared helplessly. The buzz of study ceased. The pupils wondered if this foolhardy boy had lost his mind. The master said, You did what?" "Stop to talk with Huckleberry Finn." There was no mistaking the words. "Thomas Sawyer, this is the most astounding confession I have ever listened to. No more ferule will answer for this offense. Take off your jacket." The master's arm performed until it was tired, and the stock of switches notably diminished. Then the order followed. "Now, sir, go and sit with the girls, and let this be a warning to you." The titter that rippled around the room appeared to abash the boy, but in reality that result was caused rather more by his worshipful awe of his unknown idol, and the dread pleasure that lay in his high good fortune. He sat down upon the road of the pine bench, and the girl hitched herself away from him with a toss of her head. Nudges and winks and whispers traversed the room, but Tom sat still, with his arms upon the long, low desk before him, and seemed to study his book. By and by, attention ceased from him, and the accustomed school murmur rose upon the dull air once more. Presently, the boy began to steal furtive glances at the girl. She observed it, made a mouth at him, and gave him the back of her head for the space of a minute. When she cautiously faced around again, a peach lay before her. She thrust it away. Tom gently put it back. She thrust it away again, but with less animosity. Tom patiently returned it to his place. Then she let it remain. Tom scrawled on his slate, "Please take it. I got more." The girl glanced at the words, but made no sign. Now the boy began to draw something on the slate, hiding his work with his left hand. For a time, the girl refused to notice, but her human curiosity presently began to manifest itself by hardly perceptible signs. The boy worked on, apparently unconscious. The girl made a sort of non-committal attempt to see, but the boy did not betray that he was aware of it. At last, she gave in and hesitatingly whispered, "Let me see it." Tom partly uncovered a dismal caricature of a house with 2 gable ends and a corkscrew of smoke issuing from the chimney. Then the girl's interest began to fasten itself upon the work, and she forgot everything else. When it was finished, she gazed a moment, then whispered, "It's nice. Make a man." The artist erected a man in the front yard that resembled a derrick. He could have stepped over the house, but the girl was not hypercritical. She was satisfied with the monster and whispered, "It's beautiful, man. Now make me coming along." Tom drew an hourglass with a full moon and straw limbs to it, and armed the spreading fingers with a portentous fan. The girl said, "It's ever so nice. I wish I could draw." "It's easy," whispered Tom. "I'll learn you." "Oh, will you? When?" "At noon. Do you go home to dinner?" "I'll stay if you will." "Good. That's a whack. What's your name?" "Becky Thatcher." "What's yours?" "Oh, I know. It's Thomas Sawyer." "That's the name they lick me by. I'm Tom when I'm good. You call me Tom, will you?" "Yes." Now Tom began to scrawl something on the slate, hiding the words from the girl. But she was not backward this time. She begged to see. Tom said, "Oh, it ain't nothing." "Yes, it is." "No, it ain't. You don't want to see." "Yes, I do. Indeed, I do. Please let me." "You'll tell?" "No, I won't." "Indeed, and double deed won't." "You won't tell anybody at all? Ever? Long as you live?" "No, I won't ever tell anybody." "Now, let me." "Oh, you don't want to see." "Now that you treat me so, I will see." And she put her small hand upon his, and a little scuffle ensued. Tom pretending to resist in earnest, but letting his hand slip by degrees, till these words were revealed: "I love you." "Oh, you bad thing." And she hit his hand a smart rap, but reddened and looked pleased nevertheless. Just at this juncture, the boy felt a slow, fateful grip closing on his ear, and a steady lifting impulse. In that wise, he was borne across the house and deposited in his own seat, under a pepper and fire giggles from the whole school. Then the master stood over him during a few awful moments, and finally moved away to his throne without saying a word. But although Tom's ear tingled, his heart was jubilant. As the school quieted down, Tom made an honest effort to study, but the turmoil within him was too great. In turn, he took his place in the reading class and made a botch of it, then in the geography class and turned lakes into mountains and mountains into rivers and rivers into continents till chaos was come again. Then in the spelling class and got turned down by a succession of mere baby words, till he'd brought up at the foot and yielded up the pewter medal which he had worn with ostentation for months. And that brings us to the end of chapter 6, wherein Tom's regular lady killer and a world-class dunce. But we did see the introduction of Huckleberry Finn, one of the more important characters of this book and the titular character of the next one, which is regularly lauded as the great American novel. Like, the start of American literature is like Huckleberry Finn. So we'll get to that at some point. But yeah, the more things change, the more they stay the same. You are absolutely right. Boys will find ways to try to impress girls every which way they can. And sometimes it's the young little shits that are the most forthcoming with it. And say what you will, Tom is a little shit. That's kind of his entire character, he's a little shit. That's the fun of it, though, right? All right, so we've made very good progress tonight. We're actually about a quarter of the way through the book already. Probably about a fifth, given the front loading of notes and prefaces and things. So this is not going to take us too terribly long, probably a week and a half or so. So just about on time, just about on pace, and it's fun. It's a fun read. So let's look forward to what we have tomorrow. We will end here for the night, and I will let you sit and stew over how badly I am botching southern accents of Deep South Mississippi. Because, I've gotten better at French, so now I need something new to butcher. All right. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. We have had a lot of fun so far with our beginning, with the first session of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, and I will think to myself how much of a twang I need to put on things in the future, or if we revert to a more neutral tone from tomorrow. We'll see how much I have to drink tomorrow. So, until then, let's go ahead and wrap up for the evening. Thank you very much for joining us, and until tomorrow, good night.